Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. I am very happy to be able to share this with you guys. So like, Sonalini shared, my family and I came to the US as refugees. And I immediately started working with resettlement agencies, providing interpretation and transportation. But I really wanted to make this a career. So I continued to, stay close to the resettlement agencies and helping families that, were coming in and that were new. And, I was also very glad and that I was able to go back and pursue my degree here at Wake Forest. So I am going to start about this refugee journey, and I hope that you guys will learn a few things and that you will ask questions as you learn with me. All right, so I'm going to start with the definition of refugees. So refugees are people who have fled war, violence, and conflict or persecution and have crossed an international border to find safety in another country. They often have had to flee their countries with just, clothes on their backs, leaving behind homes, possessions, jobs, and loved ones. Um, so I really felt like it was important for us to also talk about how this refugee definition is understood under the United States law. So it says that a refugee is someone who is located outside of the United States. So it's very important that you understand that someone cannot ask and be granted refugee in their home countries. So they have to flee their own countries and work with United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees to ask and be granted asylum and have the title of refugees. Maybe you might ask, and maybe I can ask you guys why you think that's the case, that a refugee has to first leave their own countries to ask for asylum. Do you have any idea? Can someone share with me?
I mean, other than just having to get out of the violence and the persecution that they face in their
A little
home.
bit louder, Clara. I can't hear you.
Okay, sorry. Other than just because it's not safe, beyond that, so much is concentrated on like having proof of what you've been through, and so um, as like it's like a commitment, I guess, if you're already outside of your own country, for lack of a better word.
Thank you, Clara. Anyone else wants to say something? You are right. So, in order to be granted asylum, you have to show that you have a fear of persecution. And most of the time, the government that is supposed to protect you, your own government, is the one that really is creating this situation where people cannot feel safe. And so you cannot say that you cannot go against your government from your own country, if that makes sense. So that's the reason why refugees have to flee their own countries and go to a resettlement country to ask for asylum. So I'll go back and say that a refugee is someone who is located outside of the United States, is of a special humanitarian concern to the United States, demonstrate that they were persecuted or fear persecution due to race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or a membership in a particular social group, is not formally resettled in another country. So you cannot be resettled in another country. For example, people who were resettled in, let's say, Canada cannot come to the United States and ask for asylum. is admissible to the United States. Refugee does not include anyone who ordered, incited, assisted, or otherwise participated in persecution of any person on account of race, religion, nationality, membership, etc. Any question about that? Okay, so I'm going to talk about places where you can find refugees. So you can find refugees in refugee camps. So refugee camps are temporary facilities built to provide immediate protection and assistance to people who have been forced to flee due to conflict, violence, or persecution. While camps are not intended to provide permanent, sustainable solutions, they offer shelter, medical treatment, food, and other basic services during emergencies. So you understand that refugee camps are not a permanent placements. They are placements, they are shelters that are built to, that are intended to provide a short period of time and receive refugees and help refugees, but it's not supposed to be a place where people can live for a long period of time, but most of the time it ended up being 20 years and more. So you can understand the conditions there. There are refugee camps all over the world. Many of these camps were built quickly to serve the immediate needs, like I was saying. Refugee hosting countries do not allow refugees to work legally, which is really unfortunate because, you know, like I mentioned, refugees ended up staying there for a long period of time. And what they are provided is not always enough. And so they ended up needing to work, but unfortunately, hosting countries are not able because they, you know, okay, let me just pose and ask the reason why you might think that hosting countries will not provide work for refugees.
Is that a fear of the refugees taking up the jobs for the locals?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, why would they want, you know, to give these jobs to people who are foreign to their countries when jobs might not even be enough for the nationals of the country? So that's exactly the case. So refugees are not able to work legally in the hosting countries. So many countries, so the only option that refugees will have is to work for NGOs that are placed in the camps. And they ended up working for a very small amount of money and sometimes in conditions that are not ideal, but you know, you have to do what you have to do to provide for your family, right?
Natasha, I'm wondering too about working in the host countries where there are camps. I mean, so many camps sometimes are on the periphery, right? I mean, I don't know what kind of jobs are available there. And also, I mean, most refugees who are in these second countries before they're resettled permanently, they are not, they're in a way kind of stateless, aren't they? I mean, they're simply being supported in a camp. I'm wondering too about the infrastructure in the country of sort of tracking those people in terms of, you know, paying taxes or, you know, I'm just wondering if those are other reasons why people can't work legally. It's because in a way they're there legally, but they're not really there as citizens or residents even. They're just there as guests for ostensibly a short period of time, even though sometimes they stay there for generations.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, after refugees are granted the title of refugees, it's a piece of paper that, you know, it's kind of like their IDs. And that is supposed to provide, you know, the legal status there that will allow them to work, that should allow them to work, that should allow them to, you know, have medical, healthcare, you know, taking care of stuff like that. But it ended up not being the case. Number one, because, you know, it's a lot of refugees. Number two, they are in addition to nationals of those countries. So they really are not the priority, you know, because these jobs that they are wanting to have, other people are wanting to have. So, you know, I mean, myself experienced the same thing. You know, my husband and I really tried to work. We were in Kenya, and you know, we thought that we were going to be fine, but you also can understand that no matter how much money you take with you and you are sitting and eating the money, but there is no income, you know, you ended up at some point needing to work and to be able to bring in more money. So we were not able to find a job. So that was very unfortunate, you know. So that's the case for a lot of people.
Natasha, if I could also just ask, so I've are refugee camps ever just informal settlements? So, you know, like I've read that on the Mexico-U.S. border, there are government-built, you know, temporary facilities, but then there are also kind of informal settlements of people who have just kind of taken over land and you know, because they don't want to necessarily go to the government shelters because they don't feel that they're particularly safe. Is like, have you do you have any other examples of refugee camps that may not have kind of formal status, you know, or are not kind of government built shelters?
So refugee camps, unless, you know, I can't even think of like a refugee camp that will not be formal, that will not be known by UNHCR, because um, as soon as refugees are in, you know, this country where they are establishing, you know, their relationship with UNHCR and are building their case with UNHCR, as long as UNHCR is present there, it becomes an official camp where everything is supposed to be provided. I mean, you know, we can talk about how limited services are, but as long as UNHCR is present on site, they are official camps.
Interesting, thank you.
So could I ask another question?
Sure.
So I wonder, because there must be a lot of variations among the refugees themselves. Some are, you know, from the poor sector, and some are maybe upper class people who, for whatever reason, became refugees. So for those who really have a lot of money, do they have other alternative arrangements?
Yes, so I am going to talk about that later, because not all refugees live in camps. So there are urban refugees who are able to rent, you know, apartments and homes and places outside of refugee camps. So they are able to do that. They have a choice of doing that. All right, so I wanted to share this picture with you guys. This is a picture that was taken when myself, my son, and the mayor of Greensboro visited a refugee camp in Uganda. That was December of 2019. This is a classroom, and it can host more than 100 students. You may ask, how is this possible? You know, because it looks small, but it happens like that. So you can imagine more than 100 kids, third graders, sitting on top of each other with one teacher who is going to teach 100 students from 8 to 12 and another 100 students from 2 to 5. These kids are traveling miles to get to this classroom, you know, and this teacher is managing this many kids. So you might ask, how is that even possible? Or how are they learning? But they manage, you know? So these are the kids that we ended up seeing here. They ended up attending, you know, school here, and sometimes, you know, most of the time they make it, you know, these kids are just amazing. To think that this is the background, this is how they end up here, and they are able to, you know, to manage. So this is my son here. He was thrilled to visit a refugee camp because he had never seen one. But we talked a lot about, you know, how fortunate we were, um, you know, to, number one, not spend that many years in, you know, in Kenya. But number two, we did not live in a refugee camp. So, you know, we wanted him to understand um, where kids come from, because I usually take them to the community centers for them to volunteer. And so they talk to kids, they ask questions. And so he wanted to understand, what is a refugee camp? What kind of life do kids have before coming to the US? So when I took him, he could not, I mean, the first 2 days, he could not sleep at night. He was asking me all kinds of questions. He wanted to help as much as possible, but also understanding that, you know, the kind of help that he had in mind was very limited to, you know, his age. But he was like, no, we are not doing enough. We have to go back. We have to do this. We have to do that. But it was a, you know, life-changing experience for him, that's for sure. And so this is the mayor of Greensboro, and this is a dad who lost his 5 kids in an apartment fire. I don't know if you guys learned about that or are aware that this is something that happened here in Greensboro. But, you know, the mayor wanted to go and see where this family came from. Wanted to understand the refugee lives and experience, so that maybe, you know, there can be something done to prepare better for when refugees come to the US and refugees we settle here in Greensboro.
So, Natasha, are these the kids who were lost in the fire?
No, no.
Oh,
These are kids from this refugee camp that we visited.
Oh, okay, sorry, yes.
Yeah, and so we took, you know, you know, like here we had school supplies that we took with us. We had clothes and shoes and stuff like that. And so my son was involved in just making sure that all the kids get some of the things that we took, including candy, which ended up being crazy how kids were fighting over that. And my son was like, oh, I don't know how he can do this. But it was a great experience for him, for sure. You know, he could not even understand how kids were happy with no cell phones. You know, kids did not have shoes on, kids did not have TVs, but they were happy. So that was something that he could not understand. But that gave him a different perspective on life, you know. Yeah, any other question about that? So urban refugees, an urban refugee is a refugee who decided or was obliged to settle in an urban area rather than in a refugee camp in the country or territory where the person fled to. So more than 60% of world refugee population and 80% of internally displaced persons under UNHCR mandate live in urban areas. So you are asking questions about, are all refugees from you know, a camp live in a refugee camp? But you know, you see that that's not the case. A lot of refugees actually do not live in refugee camps. They live elsewhere, and sometimes it can be by choice, or it can be that you know, reasons for living in urban settings rather than in refugee camps could be specific medical care needs that can't be provided for in a camp, poor and uncertain conditions in camps, or higher than average education achievement and aspirations, as camps don't provide many higher education opportunities. So we talked about limitations in camps, how there are a lot of people with very limited resources. So sometimes people ended up in urban areas because there they feel like they might be able to get to what they are not able to get to in a refugee camp. Any question about that? Okay. So I wanted to share this with you guys so you can see where refugees are coming from. And this is from the, this is from 2018, fiscal year 2018. We had a lot of refugees coming from the DRC, you know, refugees coming from Burma, Ukraine, Bhutan, Eritrea, Afghanistan, and all these other countries. So you see how many refugees were coming from DRC? It was a lot in FY 2018.
Natasha, can I ask a follow-up question about that? I
Sure.
know that Obama had a like a pronouncement, or I'm not sure it was like a legislative action, but I know that he committed to resettling Congolese refugees. I think over a course of 5 years. Did that contribute to the higher number of refugees from the DRC coming in?
Yes, but also when you see a lot of refugees coming in, it also talks about, number one, specifically what, you know, yes, the determination of an administration here, but also it can talk about what's going on in that particular country, reason why we are seeing a lot of movement. So we, at some point, we saw a lot of movement from DRC, we saw a lot of movement from Syria, before, you know, the Trump administration put a hold on certain countries. But then, you know, refugees from DRC continued to come in, even if it was just a trickle of, you know, people compared to how many were seeking asylum and how many were ready to actually resettle. But then everything was just stopped. Yeah.
Thanks, Natasha.
Okay, give me 1 second. I need to take care of something. Sorry about that. My son is, I wanted to remind him of, you know, logging in, because I could hear that he was on TV. Okay, so resettlement definition. Resettlement is the transfer of refugees from an asylum country to another state that has agreed to admit them and ultimately grant them permanent residence. UNHCR is mandated by its statute and the UN General Assembly resolutions to undertake resettlement as one of the 3 durable solutions. So resettlement is one, the other 2 are voluntary return or local integration. Resettlement is unique in that it is the only durable solution that involves the relocation of refugees from an asylum country to a third country. There were 20.4 million refugees of concern to UNHCR around the world at the end of 2019, but less than 1% of refugees are resettled each year, less than 1%. The other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is resettlement provides something that none of these other durable solution provides, which is a path to citizenship. So we talked about country of asylum and what they are able to provide. So these countries are able to provide a shelter. They are able to work with, you know, refugees who are coming in to say, okay, we are going to give you a shelter. We are going to give you an ID, which is the title of refugees, that will provide you with security. You know, we will be able to work with you. We will provide food. We will provide, you know, medical attention and all of that. But you are a stranger. You will never become a citizen of that country. You might never be able to work. You might never be able to, you know, establish a residency there. But once you are resettled, then everything is open, you know, for you. So this is something that I wanted to quickly share with you. So resettlement in the US, the number of refugees accepted to the United States each year is set by the president in consultation with Congress, and that must occur before October 1st of each year. So we talked about less than 1% is given that chance. And there are 37 countries that are resettling people in addition to the US. And the US conducts a rigorous vetting process to determine whether to accept a refugee for resettlement or not. And the entire process takes 2 years or more. So I know that, you know, you've heard so many things on TV that talked about refugees are just here, they don't vet them, they don't take the time and all of that. But imagine a vetting system that takes 2 years or more. You know, what other kind of vetting, you know, can be there to provide, you know, enough background check, enough, you know, checking with everywhere that these people said that they have been to. So it's really like a very, very thorough vetting for refugees. All right, so this shows the steps until a refugee find themselves, until refugees find themselves in a resettlement country. So first is to establish a refugee status. So we talked about refugee leaving their own country to a country of where they go and establish refugee status. So they work with UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, that will identify refugees who will need resettlement based on their vulnerability and specific needs. So step number two, UNHCR assesses each individual case, gathers all the background information, and submits the case to be considered for resettlement. Number three will be security clearance, resettlement support centers and US government intelligence agencies run background checks and security clearance processes. Step number four, the Department of Homeland Security conducts face-to-face interviews to determine whether the application qualifies for resettlement. And then pre-approved applicants go through a medical screening to ensure they do not have tuberculosis or communicable diseases. The last step will be that approved applicants are assigned to a local NGO that assists them upon arrival. These NGOs help refugees integrate and become economically self-sufficient in the new US community. Any question about that?
Yeah, Natasha, if I could ask, so is there a is there a process by which like how do they decide like which refugees go to the US, which go to Australia? Is it pretty arbitrary, or is there some determination or criteria to decide like these refugees will be sent to the US?
Yeah, so during the interviews that happen and during all this process, they ask, especially like when it is towards the last steps in the process, they ask refugees to see if they have family ties in any country outside of where they are. And so most of the time that determine where refugees ended up going. And the other thing is that they really look at the number that they have. They compare the number with countries that have accepted to take in refugees that they have at that time, because this changes almost every year. We have seen this happen here in the US, where numbers can drop every year to say this is how many refugees we're going to take. So it can go from 100,000 to 20,000 the following year. So UNHCR has to look at everything like that. They have to look at who, like which country is accepting and how many. How many refugees do we have now ready to go? And do they have family ties anywhere? If they do, then that will be, the priority that will be given. But refugees do not have a say in any of this other than sharing all this information to say, yes, I have my aunt in this state or in Canada or anywhere else. But other than that, they really do not decide. Sometimes, again, depending on the countries that are accepting, sometimes refugees that might even have family ties find themselves in different states of the US, or some find themselves in the US and some are in Europe. It really depends, and refugees do not have a say. Did that answer your question?
Thank you, Natasha.
So travel to the US. If you are approved as a refugee, you will receive a medical exam and cultural orientation. This cultural orientation is to say, this is what to expect when you get there. This is how your apartment will look like. This is what will be in the apartment. This is you will have a case manager. This is what they will be able to do with you. Things like that to cover the basic of what to expect. Sometimes the cultural orientation takes like 3 days. Sometimes it's just 2 hours, really depending on the situation. Sometimes they know last minute that they are going to travel the following day. So they don't even have any time to say goodbye, to sell their things, to, any of that. So it really depends. Refugees traveling to the US are issued loans by the International Organization for Migration, IOM, to pay for the cost of their transportation from overseas to the US resettlement sites and for various medical screening costs. The funds to cover the transportation are provided to IOM by the State Department Bureau for Population, Migration, and Refugees. The travel loan is an interest-free loan which refugees generally begin to pay back after the first 6 months of arrival. So refugees do not pay for their transportation fees. The IOM gives them this loan, but they have to repay back. And this is also something that's very important that's covered during the cultural orientation, to make sure that refugees understand that this is a loan. They are going to have to pay back. And they really emphasize on, you are given this opportunity because people who went there before you paid back. If you don't pay back, that means all these people that you lived with in this refugee camp will not be able to go, you know? So they really emphasize on refugees understanding that they have to do that with, you know, a clean conscience of what they are doing, and they are able to go or to be given this loan because other people paid back. So this is something that you will see refugees stress about. The second that they start working, you know, they will come before they are even asked and say, how can I do this? You know, what is the process? A promissory note is signed by every refugee 18 years and older prior to arrival in the US. This note confirms the refugee agreement to make regular monthly payments to the sponsoring agency. This is a picture of people waiting to travel, or maybe they have arrived to the US. But what will tell you that this is a refugee family is this bag that has IOM. This is how even resettlement agencies like caseworkers and people who are going to pick them up at the airport are able to identify the families. It's this bag. You have to hold this bag. You are told that no matter what, you can lose all these other luggages that you have, but this IAM bag, you cannot. So you will see refugees, you know, sleeping very tired at the airport. This one IAM bag they are holding on their heart, close to, you know, their body, because they understand how important this is, because this has all the documents that we talked about. This has their ID, their first ID to the US is what's in this bag. This bag has, you know, clearance documentation. This bag has medical information. This bag has pictures of the entire family, their date of birth. So everything that clients, refugees ended up getting here is based on the documents that are in that bag. Any question about that?
I can just attest to that, because every time we go to the airport to welcome an ECAR family, the case manager with us always says, "Oh, I see the IOM bag." And so it's really interesting that that's the form of identification.
Yeah, I'll tell you something that happened with us, you know, so like it can be embarrassing, you know, because when you are traveling, especially when it's not your first time to travel, and you are holding this bag, and you're told every airport that you will go through, you have to hold this bag. Sometimes you feel like, okay, everyone is looking at me. And people will come to you actually and ask, what is this, you know? So you feel like you are like easily identifiable, and that's the purpose of the bag. But sometimes it just feels like, oh, I just wish I can just put it in my bag, you know, in my luggage, so that no one asks me. But you know, that is less important than what really is in the bag.
So I have a question. The bag, when you arrive at the resettlement country and go through the border and customs, um, do they claim them, or do the refugees still have those bags with them? Do the customs officer take the bag away or some documents away?
No, they can't. They
Okay.
can't. And so what you need to know about, like, everywhere the refugees go, every airport that they go through, they are notified of them being there, So the process is different than like, if you are traveling, because you have to show your passport, but they have to show what's in the travel bag. And everywhere they go, actually, there are people who are aware of them, who will help them through the process, who will actually say, these are these people and they're fine. So that, if refugees are not even able to speak the language of the country, they have those people who are there and waiting for them, who will do the process for them. But they have to show the bag. That's the bag that will say, oh, this is a refugee, so I have to go and help them. This is that family that we are waiting for. So after a refugee arrives in the US, they are eligible for food stamps, medical insurance, employment authorization, and cash assistance. So this is what makes a difference between a refugee and any other immigrant in the US. When refugees come to the US, they are automatically given these benefits, while other immigrants will not be able to get these benefits. Okay. So refugees must apply for a green card 1 year after coming to the US. And to apply for permanent residency, this is the file that they have to apply. It's I-485, adjustment of status. And after 5 years, they apply for citizenship. So as simple as that. So they did a lot of work prior to coming to the US, but once they are here, the process is, already set up for them to, actually get to these steps to become citizens, which is really neat, except that, of course, they have to have people to help them throughout the process. They have to take classes to, ESOL classes, they have to take citizenship classes to be able to take this naturalization tests and then become citizens. So if you are a refugee in the United States and want your family members who are abroad to join you, you may file I-730, Refugee Asylum Relative Petition, for your spouse and unmarried children under 21. You must file within 2 years of your arrival to the United States unless there are humanitarian reasons to excuse this deadline. So this is something that, soon as refugees arrive to the US, resettlement agencies have to check in with each family to say, hey, let's talk about this. Do you have family members that you need to claim? Do we need to start this process? And then they connect them with, here in Greensboro, they connect with Elon Clinic. And they do this for free for refugees. Resettlement program. So refugees selected for resettlement through US Refugee Admission Program, USRAP, are eligible for reception and placement, RNP assistance, unlike asylees who arrive in the United States on their own. So refugees, again, when they arrive in the US, they are immediately connected to a resettlement agency that will pick them up at the airport, that will have an apartment ready for them, that will, help them throughout the process. And this case management is what's called RNP. And this is provided for 3 months. And RNP program provides resettlement agency one-time payment per refugee, which is $1,100 per individual. So for a family of 5, it's 1,100 times 5. If it's a single person, this is it. It's 1,100 that they have to make last 3 months. There are 2 resettlement agencies in Greensboro, Church Road Service and African Services Coalition. Upon arrival in the United States, all refugees are met by someone from a local resettlement affiliate or a family member or a friend. They are taken to their initial housing, which has essential furnishing, appropriate food, and other necessities. The resettlement agencies assist refugees with enrolling in employment services, registering youth for school, applying for social security cards, and connecting them with necessary social and language services. Refugees receive employment authorization upon arrival and are encouraged to become employed as soon as possible. The RNP program is limited to the first 3 months after arrival. Any question about that? So refugees have to work within the 3 months of arrival. Can you imagine? Being in a new country and you are told you are on your own after 3 months, you have to work and provide for your family, figure it out. Here you are. Lucky that you are here, so don't forget that. And that's it. It's hard. But refugees are so resilient, they do it. But you can imagine that they don't have the time to learn English. They don't have the time to really learn and understand the laws of the country. And that ended up being that thing that really hurt them later on. Because yes, they are provided cultural orientation after they have arrived, but cultural orientation is provided only a few weeks after they have arrived. It covers so much, and everything is expected to, like, refugees are expected to understand everything and just take in all the information. I mean, interpreters are provided, but you can imagine how much will stick with you if all this information is provided at once to you, but that's it. So, you know, that is one thing that we could do better, but yeah. Any question about that?
I know we won't have time before the break at 2, but I'm wondering, Natasha, if you have any knowledge of other refugees' experiences in other countries that resettle refugees. And just in 2 ways, I'm interested in how the reception and placement program, I'm sure it's not called that in other countries, is different. And also how the path to citizenship looks different in other countries. So it's a big question, but we might not have time before the break at 2.
Actually, I think I am towards the end.
Okay.
So we can talk about that. I mean, that's it. This is all I had for you guys. So, you know, all the other countries that I'm aware of actually require that refugees take at least 1 year to learn the language. They are being paid, the families are taken care of, they are not working, all they are doing is to learn the language. And after that, then they can start working and provide for their families. Some other countries are doing 2 years, and also they are giving that time to people who are learning differently. So there is no rush actually to finish by, you know, a certain time. So the United States is actually the only country that does not do that. That does not require that refugees or immigrants take the time to learn English or give them that time while they are supporting them. So that's why I said that, yeah, we could do better.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like I'm wondering why it's like that. I think it was better, actually. I think it got worse over time. The expectations of refugees' self-sufficiency. Hi, Sierra. People can see you. You're not
Hello.
invisible. Say hi. Yeah, I'm curious, Natasha, if, you know, we've been resettling refugees officially under this program for 40 years. Why hasn't it improved?
You know, I think it's all about how United States works. You know, it's about working and being on your own. there is not that support system that helps people get there, you know, there isn't. So other countries really are supporting that to happen. So it will mean that the government will provide for this family, you know? So it would no longer be $1,100 per family and that's it, per individual, and that's it. It will be more than that. So I don't know how it was for those other years, but I think the US is really built on individualism, on it's, you have to be on your own, you have to work hard, you have to, you know, figure things out, versus the government is here to support you. I mean, you can even think about the universal health care, you know, in Canada and other countries, but that is not the case here. So, yeah.
I think that's a really good point, that the infrastructure here doesn't even support folks here already in ways that are designed to be holistic like this, right? So, yeah. Sira says, hello, Moto.
Hi, Sira. How's it going? So we're almost at 2. So Natasha, that was great. If you don't mind, we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll have about 25 to 30 minutes for you all to ask Natasha any questions that you might have. So we're at 2. So maybe come back at 2:10, and I'll see you all. I'll see you all in a bit. Thanks.
If no question right now, I wanted you guys to consider volunteering, and if you want to do that, I shared on the like the PowerPoint has all the websites for resettlement agencies as well as us. We are always happy to take volunteers at the community centers, because really, not because that's my job, but I think that's where the most important work is done. Because resettlement agencies, again, like I said, they work with refugees those first few months, but then after that, it's really on us to help them throughout, you know? And one thing that's really neat about us, we do not have a certain time to work with our clients. We do not have federal funding that will limit us to serve our clients for a certain period of time. So we are really open. If a client has been here 10 years and they need us, we work with them. If they have been here a year or less, they need us, we work with them. And we work with the entire family versus just one individual. Plus, we are where they live. So they don't need to take the buses to come to us. We go to them. So we don't have an office where they will, you know, have to come and get an appointment. It's working. We go to them. We get cases however we feel like. So we have that trust in the community, and we don't take it for granted. We really work hard to get that trust.
Yeah, I think Allison, did you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of ask kind of like how, I know that we talked a little bit about this, but like how you could see like improvements in the resettlement process in terms of like, do you think that there should be kind of like what we're talking about in terms of like a community approach where you have kind of like what you're speaking about, like going in, or should there be like more federal support, or just kind of your personal reflections on what do you think could be improved about the resettlement process?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think, you know, supporting refugees after they have arrived is very, very crucial and very important, because, you know, if it's not happening with resettlement agencies, as individuals, we can do it, you know? So like being there, being present, being available to support them is very important, because I mean, you know, waiting for governments to do something might be out of our reach, but you know, why not start with what we can do as individuals, you know, as a class, you know, just as a group of friends, you know, to be a friend with someone, to help them, you know, with their ESL journey, to help them understand, you know, the citizenship questions that they have to memorize to be able to become citizens. Things that might seem small, but that are very important for a refugee to thrive here in the US.
Yeah, I think following up on Allison's question, I know you created a women's group for the Umoja women's group for Congolese women. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you think that community has helped you and other Congolese women in the area.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Thank you for the question. Sometimes I feel like that group is me, but sometimes I forget to talk about it because I go into like my day-to-day work and forget how important that group is. So this is a group that was created in 2014 to support refugee women, especially Congolese, because that time a lot of them were coming, a lot of refugees were coming from the DRC, and a lot of women were single parents, single mothers. They needed a lot of support. So when I started, it was more of me being feeling lonely and wanted to just be with other group of women who speak the languages that I speak. And very quickly, I realized that the loneliness that I was feeling was felt by all of them, you know? So they really wanted to have that time to talk about their feelings, to talk about, you know, their adjustment to the culture in the US, their parenting skills that were clashing with parenting skills in the US, the expectation, all of these things. So we started meeting on Saturdays. So we will pray, we will cook, we'll eat, all of that. But very quickly, as they started working, we realized that meeting every week was not doable. And so we moved to meeting once a month in people's apartments. And then as the group grew bigger, and after we were joined by professors from UNCG, ANT, UNC Chapel Hill, and our then director, Holly. She was the CNNC director at that time. I was not even employed by CNNC then, because like, I don't know if you remember, but I started at CNNC in 2017. So it was 3 years after I started the group. Then we started needing a bigger space for our meeting. And so Moran Sonu, who was one of the professors who joined the group, offered for us to meet on a monthly basis and at ANT. So we were given classrooms at ANT to use. But again, it was that safe space for people to talk and just to share how they feel. And I was very fortunate to be able to be part of the group, to start the group, and also to work with, you know, different groups, really, if you will, because it was a group of refugees and a group of US professionals, you know? And so being in the middle, you know, offering interpretation and seeing really what was going on, and for this group of professionals to be present and offer their way of understanding and being available to support this group of women was everything to me, because it showed how powerful people could be if they are given the support. So we saw these women go from not even wanting to get out of bed, you know, feeling very lonely, not knowing, you know, how they were going to survive, to, I mean, like looking forward to our meetings and feeling very like vibrant and you know, dancing and sharing and really wanting to take ownership of this group and make sure that this group sees the next level. So the group is still strong. We're still meeting. We still meet once a month. And if nothing else, it's a support group, you know, to know that the women who are in the group can you know, reach out to each other and say, hey, you know, what's going on? Or, hey, this is how I'm feeling. Can we get together or something like that? So that offered that sense of family togetherness that women were missing, because um, they are used to live like that in their countries of origin. They had that support system that did not come with them, but to know that they found something here similar to what they were used to was very important to them and still is.
So I want to follow up with the question, Natasha. I think to some degree, you know, I come from a very different part of the world, and from China. So in the among the Chinese communities here, there are also different kind of subgroups, um, and people from minority background might don't feel extremely comfortable socializing with people from the majority group. So there are kind of fractions, even within the small community coming from the same country initially. So do you see that kind of inner tension also, whether it's based on ethnic background or religion or whatever? And how do you deal with that?
Wow, what a question. Yes, absolutely. And unfortunately, there are those kinds of divisions. Number one, because DRC is huge and they have a lot of ethnic groups, they have different languages, and they can tell just by, you know, hearing someone speak which part of DRC they are from, or which church people attend to here in the US. I mean, like, unfortunately, people tend to look at what divide them versus what unite them. So, you know, I have had to deal with these situations, but also really what I used was to say, hey, we're all here, right? We made it here. Think about people who are still in refugee camps. Even if it's really hard here, at least we are here. You know, think about how long you worked and waited to be here. And I'm not saying that those divisions are not, I mean, what's different between you guys, it's not important, but it really is less important here because no one is taking the time to really think about that. Everyone is really about working and surviving. That should not be in our way, because if we continue to do that, we are not going to get anywhere, because we are creating obstacles, you know, and these are really things that will make us not focus on the real situation that we have in front of us, okay? And that real situation for us women, mothers, wives, is how do I survive this? How do I make sure that my family is fed? How do I make sure that I'm raising my kids right? How do I make sure that I know the US laws, that I'm not going to find myself in trouble, or my kids, things that really are supposed to be about you making this country yours, because we are no longer back there. We are here now. We have to make this work. We are not going to create division and tensions that do not even make sense here. That's the reason why you fled, right? So why do you want to go backwards versus moving forward? And I think that just giving that different perspective to people is very helpful. I've seen it work. So yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know if the students have any questions, but if as they're thinking, maybe I can also ask a question about, like, it sounds like a lot of your work involves a lot of emotional labor, like working with refugees. I know there's a lot of trauma that you have to, engage with and sit with people's, pain. And I wondered, if you feel like, I mean, like, how do you, because sometimes I feel like there's a very individualized response to, like, oh, just like do a meditation app, or like, take a walk, or, and these are really structural issues. And I know the whole CNNC staff is populated primarily by women of color. And I know there's a lot of emotional labor expected. And so, yeah, this is not a very articulate question, but I wondered if you had, like, what do you do to kind of cope with some of the challenges that come with doing a lot of, like, care work for other people, and just that emotional labor?
So I think actually, like, caring for them is what I do. That makes me feel better about whatever, knowing that I, like, in my position, I'm able to help someone get somewhere, helps me, because I think about when I was new to this country, and when I didn't know where to go, when I didn't want to speak because I felt not confident, in my English, to be able to go out to the grocery store, to be able to really do anything. I will just push my husband because he was more comfortable in his English. He had worked with the UN system. He had been to the US several times. So I was like, okay, this is your world. You just go, you bring whatever we need, and I'm just gonna stay home. But at some point, as an educated person who left my country, with a degree, I felt like defeated. I was like, no, I got to do something. I'm not gonna just, let my fears get in the way. I'm just gonna get up and do something. And then I started working, but unfortunately it was not in the field that made me feel better about myself, or really, like, I felt actually really, really bad, because it was that type of job that, where people questioned my being here, like, you don't speak English, like, why are you here, things like that. But I also was very, like, glad that I took that job, because it even pushed me harder to be like, okay, this is not the type of job that I need. but I'm going to do something about it. And so sharing my journey with people, I feel like it helps me, because I don't want people to have to go through the same things that I went through if they can avoid it. You know what I'm saying? So that actually helps me. I don't do things that might be things that people will expect as like things to take care of me. But I feel like being with the women, like speaking in our language where I don't have to think about, okay, what is this word that I'm looking for? And then this word will come in French. It will come in Swahili, but it will not come in English. So we just go very like fluently in our language. We laugh, we dance, we eat. And that is therapy to me. I also do Zumba. I love it. And, I do that on Saturdays. Um, my whole family, like we have a gym membership, but we do different things. So like when I'm doing my Zumba, I'm in my world and I feel ready for the week and ready for whatever the week will bring. So yeah.
Thanks, Natasha. And I don't want to keep you too long because I know you have a dead appointment. So maybe we'll end it here. I'm gonna be in touch with you because I want to volunteer at the community center. So I'm gonna send you a message and see if that might be a possibility in the near future. But hey, will you all join me in thanking Natasha for her time with us today and her excellent presentation? Oh, Alison, did you want to? Oh, you're clapping. Okay.
I was just trying to clap. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah, Natasha, I do have a very quick question for you about the volunteer thing. Do you have an age limit? For example, if a high school student wants to volunteer, is that possible or no?
High school, like what? Because we have high schoolers, we have middle schoolers, we have elementary schoolers. So like really what we get volunteers for is to help kids with their schoolwork, help kids read. So if it's really something that this high schooler is able to do, of course, no problem. And the other thing that we usually run into is the commitment, because high schoolers have a lot of work. And so they might say, okay, we are going to be here, but then ended up not being consistent. And the last thing is transportation, because sometimes they rely on someone else to bring them, and that ended up also being in the way. But other than that, yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Natasha. This was great. And yeah, I'll be in touch. And yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really neat to be with you guys and to meet you all and just to spend time with you. So I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Take good care.
Bye.
Bye all.